They said a man shouldn't go near a woman with no name and nothing but tears on her skin. But I opened the barn door anyway, and found her there curled in the hay sobbing, naked, silent, and shaking like the devil himself had kissed her soul. I didn't ask her name, not that first night, because something in her eyes said it had been stolen from her. Same as her clothes. Her voice in whatever piece she once knew. It was late autumn when she arrived, the kind of cold that crept under your collar and rattled your bones. I heard the knock after midnight, soft, unsure, like even the sound was afraid to wake the house. She stood there in a threadbare cloak soaked to the knees in mud, her lips pale, and cracked her voice barely a whisper. "Please," she said, "just a place to lie down just for the night." I could have turned her away, I should have. But there was something wrong and right about her all at once, like a hymn sung backward, like a prayer wrapped in gunpowder. I told her the barn had straw and a wool blanket I kept out there for strays. She nodded, said nothing more, and I watched her walk barefoot toward the dark shape in the distance, the hem of her cloak dragging in the mud behind her. She didn't look back come morning. I figured she'd be gone, but as the sun cracked over the ridge and I stepped into the barn, I stopped dead in the doorway. The cloak was folded neat over the gate, the blanket was kicked off to the side, and she was lying in the hay, naked, crying, arms wrapped around her knees like she was holding in a scream that might rip the sky. And still, she didn't look ashamed, just empty. I took a slow step in, clearing my throat. She didn't flinch. I said, "You all right?" No answer, just a shiver through her shoulders. I could see the bruises then along her ribs. Faint, old, maybe, or maybe not. She finally said in a voice cracked like dry riverbed, "They're gone now. You don't have to worry." "Who's gone?" Silence. I knelt, careful not to get too close. "I got clothes in the house. You're welcome to a bath, some bread." Still nothing. Then she turned her face toward me, and I'll never forget that look. Not in all my living days. It wasn't sadness, it was survival, the ghost of fight left in a girl who'd been fighting too damn long. And I realized I wasn't looking at a stranger, I was looking at a storm that had a woman's face. I handed her a flannel shirt and some old trousers I kept from younger days. Loose but warm, she took them wordless, turned her back, and dressed with hands that moved like muscle memory, like she'd done it before in the dark alone. I didn't watch, not out of decency, but because something told me this wasn't the first time a man had looked too long. She came into the house quiet as the morning itself. I had coffee on the stove and bread in the oven. She sat across from me at the little pine table, steam rising between us. Like a veil, neither one of us was ready to lift. Her hair was still damp straw, clung to the ends. She looked small in the clothes, like a girl dressed in someone else's life. I asked again, gentle this time, "You got a name?" She didn't answer, so I tried again. "Well, him called Silas. You can use it if you need something." That got a flicker in her eyes, a blink, then a whisper. I said, "Pretty name." She shook her head. "It ain't mine, not really." Didn't press, just poured her coffee and slid a plate across. She stared at it for a long time before eating, like someone who forgot what full felt like. After breakfast, I figured she'd ask for a horse or a map, or maybe just vanish like fog when the sun climbs too high. But she didn't. She went back to the barn. Didn't say a word. And I let her. I spent the day mending fence posts, but I kept glancing toward that weather-beaten barn like it held more than just hay and ghosts. By nightfall, she still hadn't come out. I walked out there slow, the air hung thick with the scent of pine dust and silence. I cracked open the barn door and saw her curled in the hay again, dressed this time, awake, eyes wide open, and locked on the rafters like she was reading secrets in the beams. She didn't startle when I spoke. "You hungry?" She said nothing. I sat in the hay a few feet off, close enough to see the tremble in her fingers, but far enough she wouldn't bolt. She said finally, "He used to hide in places like this, in the hay, waiting." I didn't ask who. Didn't have to. I just said, "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you here, Etta." She turned her head, then really looked at me. "You say that now." Her voice cracked like it was made of brittle glass. "You say that now, but wait till night starts talking. Wait till you start wondering who I really am." And that's when I knew she wasn't just hiding from something. She was running from herself. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear, but from wondering what kind of hell she'd walked through to make a barn feel safer than a bed. Every creak of the wind outside felt like footsteps. Every shadow along the wall moved wrong by morning. I was up before the rooster, watching the sky pale through the kitchen window, hands wrapped tight around a chipped mug of bitter coffee. She came in just as the sun touched the hilltop. Hair tangled, face smudged with dirt, and something older than sorrow. She didn't speak, just stood in the doorway like she was testing if the air inside was safe. I said, "Made more bread, got eggs too." She nodded and sat still. No thanks, no small talk, just hunger in every motion, like even chewing was something her body remembered before her mind caught up. As I cooked, I felt her eyes on me. Not curious, not cautious, something else. Like she was trying to decide if I was real, or another trick the world had played on her. After breakfast, she asked if she could help. I handed her a bucket and pointed to the chickens. She moved like a woman who'd done it 100 times, though she flinched every time the rooster crowed. By midday she was hauling wood like she'd lived there her whole life. But the truth was she didn't. And I knew. One day soon something or someone would come down that ridge trail looking for her. So I asked, "Careful, you got someone out there might be missing you." She stiffened. Then, "Not missing, hunting." That word changed the air between us. I looked up. She was staring off at the tree-lined shoulders, rigid eyes, sharp, a wounded animal that forgotten what peace sounded like. "Husband?" I asked, though I regretted it the second it left my lips. She gave a crooked smile, one that didn't reach her eyes, something worse. Didn't press her, just said, "If someone comes around asking, I'll do the talking and I'll keep my shotgun close." She turned then fully, and her voice dropped so low, it felt like it was stitched with warning. "If you keep me here, Silas, you might have to use it." I said nothing, but in my gut I knew whatever she'd run from wasn't done with her yet. It was 3 nights later when the first sign came. ID left the lamp burning in the kitchen window. Habit more than anything. I was carving a bit of cedar by the stove when I heard the barn door creak, not slam, not bang, just creak, soft, like it had been eased open. Slow, I stood up, listened. Then came the sound of her footsteps on the porch. Barefoot, light, hesitant. She didn't knock, just opened the door and stood there in the glow of the lamp, like something carved from moonlight and sorrow. The flannel shirt hung off her shoulder, the buttons half done, her arms crossed like armor, but her eyes were glassy. "I can't sleep," she said. "It's loud tonight." I nodded, didn't ask what she meant. Some folks hear coyotes, others hear memory. I gestured to the fire. "Sit," she did, cross-legged on the rug like a child trying to remember, comforted. I passed her the cedar carving. Just a little bird I'd been shaping for no one in particular. She held it like it might fly away. Then she whispered, "Do you believe people can be haunted?" I said, "Only the ones who survived something they shouldn't have." That brought silence, deep, heavy. Her hands clenched around the bird. "When I was 15, she began. A man bought me for 6 chickens and a saddle horse." My gut turned. I was supposed to clean, cook, stay quiet, but he had other uses in mind. Her eyes never left the flames. "I ran the first time he caught me," said the next time I'd even a box. So I waited 6 years till I found a box big enough for him. I didn't breathe. She looked at me then, face pale, jaw trembling, but her eyes steady. "That's who's hunting me." The fire cracked outside, wind picked up against the window panes. But in that room it was still as a church before the sermon. I reached out, slow as dusk, and set my hand over hers. Not to comfort, not to claim, just to stay. "You're safe here, Etta, whatever it costs." Her lips parted, but no words came, just a breath, shaky, grateful, wounded. And when she leaned into me, forehead resting just under my jaw, hands still tight around that wooden bird, I held her like I was holding back a flood, because part of me knew she hadn't told me the whole truth, and the part she left out was the part that might get us both killed. 3 days passed, calm on the surface, but not quiet. Etta started talking more, not much, but enough. She liked honey in her coffee. Said her mother used to hum to the chickens so they'd lay smoother eggs. Said thunder used to scare her until she learned it couldn't kill what was already dead inside. I didn't ask questions anymore. I just let her speak when she wanted, and kept my eyes sharp when she didn't. I caught her once tracing a scar just under her collarbone, long, faint, not fresh, but deep enough it must have split her open when it happened. I looked away before she noticed me looking. At night she stayed in the barn by choice. She said 4 walls felt too much like a cage, too much like his house. But on the 5th night I was the one who couldn't sleep. Something in the wind had shifted. Animals were restless. My hound, Boone, wouldn't stop pacing the porch in the air. It felt like it was holding its breath around midnight. I lit the lantern and stepped outside. The barn was dark, too dark. I called her name once softly, Etta. No answer. I stepped closer, slid the door open. She wasn't in the hay. She wasn't anywhere, but her blanket was torn. The cedar bird I carved had been snapped in half and left on the floorboards and on the inside of the barn wall. Scratched in dirt with what looked like a nail were 5 words he found me. I ran, my heart dropped. I grabbed my rifle and saddled the mare, rode fast to the ridgeline, eyes scanning for tracks, and that's when I saw the boot prints, big ones fresh dragging, and just beyond the tree line, a trail of blood in the snow. Not enough to kill, but enough to mark. I followed it for 2 miles before I found her face down in the snowbank. Dress torn, lip bleeding, hands bound in front with rope shed chewed half through. She looked up when I slid off the saddle. Her eyes widened, but she didn't scream. She just said, "Is close." I lifted her into the saddle, gun drawn the whole time. "Then let him come," I said, but deep down I knew something had it didn't ID, just made myself a target. I brought her back just before dawn. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just stared straight ahead with that rope still tied around her wrists, like she wanted the pain to remind her she was still alive. I cut it loose by the firelight and saw how raw her skin was underneath. I fetched water, tore a strip from an old cotton sheet, wrapped her wrists with shaking hands. She flinched once when I touched her, but only once. "Did he say anything?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Said I had till sundown, said if I didn't come back willing, he'd burn your house down, barn too, then take me anyway." Her voice broke, then came back harder. "Said I was his. Said no man could ever scrub me clean." I felt something cold curl up in my gut, because this wasn't just a bruiser or drunk with fists and rage. This was a man who owned fear, who studied it, cultivated it like a crop, and Etta should been the harvest. I loaded the shotgun, checked the rounds, pulled the pistol from under the floorboard, and handed it to her. She hesitated, then took it. "Can you shoot?" I asked. "I used to be able to breathe too," she said. I nodded. That was answer enough. We boarded up the windows, put out the lamps. I stabled the mare far from the house, just in case the bastard had a torch and a grudge to match. Then we waited hours, past the sun dragged across the floor like a slow noose tightening. Etta sat by the front window, eyes locked on the horizon. I could see the weight on her chest pressing heavier with every shadow that stretched longer across the land. And just before sundown we heard the hooves, one horse, slow, confident. I stepped onto the porch with the shotgun raised. He came riding up the trail like he owned the whole damn world. Dressed in a long black coat, face like a skull, half-stitched in leather, eyes that smiled without warmth. He stopped 10 paces from the porch, tilted his head like he was amused. "Evening," he said, voice like gravel and old whiskey. "Heard you found something belongs to me." I didn't answer. He grinned wider. "Girl's broken, don't waste your time fixin' her. She was born for a leash." I cocked the shotgun, walk away. I told him. He laughed, not loud, just soft, like he'd heard it all before. Then he said, "You don't know what she did, do you?" I said, "Nothing. She killed my brother while he slept. Slit his throat like a butcher over eggs." "You believe that?" Behind me I felt Etta step onto the porch. Her voice cut through the dusk like a blade. "Your brother broke me first, that was it." The man's face dropped real still. Then he reached for his holster. I pulled the trigger before his fingers touched leather. The blast echoed through the hills. His body slumped sideways off the horse, hit the dust. Hard silence, no breath, no scream. Just the wind in the pines. I turned to Etta, her lips trembled. And then, just for a second, she smiled. Not wide, not joyful, but free. We buried him just past the creek where the tree roots run deep, and the wind forgets to whisper. No cross, no name, no prayers, just dirt over bones and silence over sins. Etta watched, arms folded tight, face unreadable. I could see it in her. The part of her that wanted to spit on the grave, and the other part that wanted to crawl in beside it and disappear. I said nothing, just handed her the shovel when I was done. She stood there a moment, then dropped it. "He was the last," she said softly. I nodded. "You sure?" Her jaw clenched. "I thought so once before. I didn't press." We walked back slow, no horses, no talk. Just boots crunching in the gravel, two people stitched together by something uglier than fate. That night she slept inside, didn't ask, didn't explain, she just curled up in the armchair near the fire and closed her eyes. I sat across from her watching the flames dance shadows across her face, and I realized something. That storm in her, it wasn't gone, just quieter now, like thunder after a long rain. Around midnight she stirred Silas. She whispered. I looked up, her voice cracked. What happens now? I leaned forward. Whatever you want, you can leave at first light or stay as long as the land will have you. She looked at me like I'd offered her the whole world and she didn't know where to put it. Then if I stay, will you still look at me the way you do now? I didn't know what she meant until she said the next part, like I am not ruined. My chest ached. I stood across the room slow and knelt beside her chair. I took her hand, not soft, not trembling, just hers. And I said, you're not ruined, you're reborn. She leaned and rested her forehead against mine. And we stayed like that. Two souls breathing the same fire-warmed air, waiting to believe in something better than survival. But peace don't come easy in the West, and ghosts don't stay buried just because you stop saying their names. 3 weeks passed, the kind of quiet days you almost don't trust, when nothing breaks, nothing bleeds. And the only thing chasing you is sunlight through the pines at a state. She moved through the house like she belonged there, feeding the hens, fixing the crooked drawer in the kitchen. Even humming again soft little tunes with no words, as if her soul was remembering how to sing. Sometimes I'd catch her staring out the window with this far-off look, not scared, just searching, like she was waiting for a past to finally admit it was finished with her. I wanted to believe it was. I wanted to believe I could hold her hand without watching for shadows behind her. But peace in a place like this, it's a trick the land plays before it takes something else. And that something came one night just after supper. The knock on the door wasn't soft. It was heavy, rhythmic, like a marshal's boot on hardwood. I opened, slow, shotgun behind the frame. 2 men stood there, dusty, well-dressed, too well-dressed for our kind of town. One wore a silver chain over his vest. The other had a U.S. Marshal badge. Real or fake, I couldn't tell in the dark. The one with the chain spoke first. Evening, we're looking for a woman. Late 20s, brown hair, sharp tongue. Might go by Etta, but we figure that ain't her real name. I didn't blink. Why you looking? Marshal stepped forward. Murder charge, back east, man found cut up in his parlor chair with a kitchen knife still in his chest. Neighbors said he kept a girl locked up in the attic. Said she vanished same night as blood hit the rug. Chain Vest smiled. We're just trying to bring justice, sir. Let the courts do their part. Etta stood behind me, then quiet, barefoot, and unafraid. He was a judge, she said flatly. You won't find justice in a courtroom that still bears his name. The marshal reached for his belt. Slow, ma'am. You come with us. Ain't no sense making it messier than it already is. I stepped in front of her. You got papers? He pulled them out. Warrant, real ink, real seal. My heart sank, but Etta, she didn't flinch. She stepped forward, hands loose at her sides, eyes locked on theirs. Tell me one thing first, she said. Does his wife know what he did to the girls he kept locked behind that paneled door? Marshal shifted. No. Etta nodded. Then, I reckon you're not hunting me for justice, you're cleaning up for the dead. She turned to me then, her voice soft but sure. Don't fight this, Silas. No, I said you don't run anymore, not for them, not for him. But she shook her head, pressed her palm against my chest. Him not running, him facing. If I don't walk through the fire now, it'll always be in the smoke. And before I could speak again, she stepped out into the dark, surrendered, and left the air around me cold and hollow. I watched them ride off into the dark with her between them. No chains, no cuffs. Just silence, and the way her shoulders stayed straight, even as the night swallowed her. The second they disappeared past the ridge, I saddled my horse. Didn't pack much. Just a canteen, a box of shells, and the letter she left under my pillow. One line scrawled in trembling ink. If they kill me, bury me near your barn. The hay was the only place I ever felt clean. That broke something in me I didn't know was still whole. I rode hard through the night. No sleep. No fire, just the sound of hooves pounding out a rhythm my heart couldn't keep up with. By dawn, I'd reached Rock Bend, the halfway town where Marshall stopped for whiskey and a hot meal before delivering bodies to the gallows. I stabled the mare and walked straight into the sheriff's office. Empty. I Just a lazy deputy with his boots on the desk chewing tobacco and reading yesterday's sheet. Marshal Tannen passed through here? I asked. He looked up, spit in a can. Maybe who's asking. I said the man whose house he took her from. His eyes narrowed. You mean the girl? Quiet one? Pretty? Couldn't call. I nodded. He shrugged, left her in the jail cell, went to get a judge from Raven's Hollow trials tomorrow. I didn't wait. The cell was in the back, and there she was, sitting on the cot like it was a throne of thorns. Her dress was torn again. Goddamn thing couldn't seem to survive a week without being ripped, but her chin was high. When she saw me, her eyes welled fast. You weren't supposed to come. I leaned on the bars. You weren't supposed to go. She stood close to me, close enough that I could see the faint bruising under her jaw. Not new, not fresh, just lingering reminders. I have to face this, she whispered. I shook my head. No, you already did. That man you killed. He wasn't justice. He was the rope they used to hang every girl who didn't smile wide enough. Eda's voice cracked. They'll bury me, Silas. Then he'll dig you up, I said, and build the kind of world you deserve to live in. Eve. Before either of us could speak again, the office door slammed. Marshal Tannen stepped in, coat still dusty, that silver chain glinting like a threat. Well, well, he said, lovebirds reunited. How sweet. I turned his hand, twitched toward his holster, but mine was faster. The click of my hammer echoed loud. Open the cell, I said. He smiled. You gonna shoot a lawman? I nodded once. If the law forgot who it's supposed to protect, then it ain't worth obeying. He weighed his options, then sneered. Ill. See you both hanged for this. I said you can try. He reached for the keys, slow eyes burning holes through me, and unlocked the cell. Eda stepped out, not behind me, beside me. And just like that we were running again. But this time, not away from the past, this time towards something worth living for. We didn't ride fast. We rode smart through the old hunting trails behind Rock Bend, under canopies of pine that hadn't seen a horse in years. I led, and Eda stayed close, rifle, slung, jaw, tight eyes, always scanning. Shed stopped, flinching at every sound, but she hadn't stopped looking over her shoulder. We aimed for the southern border town called Sable Creek, where the law moves slow, and the hands at the checkpoint looked the other way for the right kind of story. Eda didn't ask where we were going. She didn't have to peek. She trusted me now, fully, not because I promised her peace, but because I'd already bled to buy her someone. 2 days in, we made camp near a river bend fire. Low horses hobbled. She sat beside me in the grass, close enough our shoulders touched. I used to dream about dying, she said, voice low. Now I dream about staying alive long enough to be something more than what they did to me. I turned to her. You already are. She looked up, and this time she believed it. We kissed then, not frantic, not rushed, just real, the kind of kiss that tastes like salvation. And that night, in the shelter of the trees and the rhythm of crickets, I held her like a man who finally knew what it meant to stay. But nothing in this world stays sweet for long. Not out here, not when blood still stains the road behind you. At dawn the sky turned orange peaceful, but my gut told me something wasn't right. I spotted the glint first off a ridgeline, glass or metal, then the echo of hooves. Too many. I grabbed Eda and we ran horses, packed fire, kicked out. We made it a mile before the first shot rang out. Cracked a tree trunk right above our heads. Go! I shouted. She didn't argue. We split the trail, met back up near the creek. Mud made the path hard to follow, but not impossible. Marshal Tannen wasn't coming with warrants this time. He was coming with a posse, 6 riders, hard men, the kind who don't ask questions, just ride for coin and kill for pride. I led Ed to the old cabin at the cliff's edge, half buried in moss, barely standing, a moonshiner's relic I'd used once in a storm. We waited there, breathing, listening. She leaned in close, whispered, You don't have to die for me. I said no, but I'd kill for you. That made her cry, soft, quiet, the kind of tears that come after too much holding back. And when the hooves got closer and the voices echoed in the trees, I took her hand and said, We end it here, one way or another. They came just after noon, 6 riders on black horses, coats flapping like vultures, wings, rifles, strapped pistols loose in holsters. Marshal Tannen led them, his face set like stone, but his eyes were full of fire, not justice, not duty, just something mean and personal. The cabin stood at the cliff's edge like a secret waiting to be heard. I stood out front, rifle in hand, Eda behind the half-broken wall. No more shaking, No more running, just the fight. Tannen raised a hand to stop his men, stepped forward, boots crunching the dry brush beneath him. I gave you a chance, Silas. He called out no. I said you gave me a story, one filled with half-truths and dead girls. I'm choosing the truth. He sneered. She killed a judge, a federal man. She freed herself from a monster you were too cowardly to expose. He shifted, touched the butt of his revolver. You can't protect her, not from all of us. I raised my rifle. Try me. That was when all hell broke loose. The first shot rang out from Etta, dropped the man on the far left before he could even draw. The second came from me. Tannen's shoulders snapped back. Blood blooming through his coat like red ink. They scattered for cover, firing. Wild wood splintered around us. A bullet carved through the cabin wall. An inch from Etta's cheek. She didn't scream, just reloaded with a calm that made my heart hurt. I caught one in the thigh. He dropped, howling. Another charged the front and got a barrel of buckshot to the gut. The recoil slammed into my chest, but I stayed standing. Tannen kept coming. Wounded but relentless, he ducked behind a stump, took one more shot, and the round hit me in the ribs hard, felt like fire exploded in my side. I dropped to a knee. Etta screamed my name. She ran out, pistol raised, aiming straight at the man who'd hunted her for years. Tannen stood smiling. You don't have it in you, he spat, but you did. One shot right between the eyes. He hit the dirt before he hit the truth. Silence fell like snow. No more gunfire, no more hooves, just the wind and the smell of pine and blood. She dropped the pistol, fell to her knees beside me, pressed her hands to the wound. I smiled through the pain. Ain't deep, just messy. You're bleeding, she choked. I took her face in both hands. So, are you inside? She cried. Then real tears, the kind that wash everything out with them. The last rider fled, spooked or spared. I didn't care. We sat there in the wreckage. Two survivors stitched together by pain, forgiveness, and gunpowder. That night we burned what was left of the cabin, watched the flames eat the past, and in the morning, we rode not as fugitives, not as ghosts, but as something closer to whole. We crossed the border by noon. No questions asked, no one looking for a girl with bruises and a borrowed name. We found a quiet stretch of land, just south of anywhere that mattered, built a new cabin, grew vegetables, raised chickens. Sometimes she'd stand in the barn doorway, sunlight catching her hair, and I do remember that first night. Her curled in the hay, crying, naked, broken. Now she stood tall, strong, free. She still never told me her real name, and I never asked, because I knew the only name that mattered was the one she chose for herself, and the only truth I needed was that she stayed with me.